Here is what I would do if I was looking to lose 20 kilos. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, everybody. My name is Michael from the Coaching Collective, and I thought I'd put together a little video today which depicts exactly what I would do if I was looking to lose 20 kilograms of body fat. Well, obviously we need to recognize that when we talk about 20 kilograms, it doesn't necessarily mean that the entire 20 kilograms is going to come from body fat, because as we are aware, we will see some muscle wastage throughout that process, especially with that magnitude of loss. But let's consider that we're maybe like a 115 kilogram male looking to go to around the 95 kilogram mark. What steps would I take? Now, contextually, I'm going to consider that this is going to be a process of someone who hasn't got the luxury of hiring a coach, because obviously if we are hiring a coach, we're going to be in a position where we would follow their orders, take their instruction, ask questions, so on and so forth. So imagine we're just trying to do this completely self-sufficiently, and we're going to consider the context of where we're at. So we're 30 years old, we're not exercising currently, we're not eating well currently, we're not taking any supplementation, we're not addressing our health at all. We're looking to make a big lifestyle shift. So this is the context of the individual that we're dealing with. So the individual is potentially someone with children, with a busy job, someone who's let themselves go, someone who's put themselves on the back burner in the pursuit or in the necessity to prioritize other areas of their lives. And I've been in this position before. Time goes on or time passes, and then you one day wake up and realize, shit, I've let myself go a little bit more than I would like. I need to make a change. So if I was in this position, how would I go about it? Well, first and foremost, we need to talk about our pre-planning phase. So first and foremost, I'd sit down, I'd write down what my objective is. So what is my goal? And next to my goal, I'll write down the reason why I want to achieve this goal. So do I want to be my best self? Do I want to be more confident again? Do I want to be confident on the beach? Do I want to be a more nimble, healthy person for my children and for my family? Do I want to just optimize my health in the long term, so on and so forth? Recognize your why. This part of the journey may seem insignificant, and it might not be exactly what you're here to hear. Although it's important that we recognize throughout the course of these journeys, there are going to be times where we're challenged. There are going to be times where we're not motivated. There are going to be times where we fall off the bandwagon. And that's where it becomes important that we can reference back to our why. And what I would definitely be doing at this point is having a weekly check-in with yourself, weekly journal entry to reflect on how far you've come, to reflect on what you've done throughout the week, what your intentions are, whether you've progressed, so on and so forth. And I think by having this intention, having this why, having this deeper meaning, it's much easier to stay motivated, it's much easier to stay on track, and it's much easier to get yourself back on track in the context of times where we do potentially fall away, which is going to happen across the course of a journey. So 20 kilograms, we need to consider that it will take a little bit longer than we probably anticipate. So 20 kilograms, typically when we work with clients here at the Coaching Collective, we aim for 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. So for a 100 kilogram individual, we'll be looking anywhere between 500 grams and a kilogram per week. So best case scenario, 20 weeks, 20 kilograms. That would be 20 weeks of 100% adherent. And if we're coming from a position where we're not doing things right, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to really adhere to this capacity. And we need to recognize that this is okay. So first and foremost, let's just say the target was 20 weeks. We probably want to add 50% of that just to create some buffer room and just to make sure that we don't become demoralized by our trajectory, our rate of loss, so on and so forth. I think this is incredibly important. So once we've established this, where would we start? We said that we were inactive. So first and foremost, I'd want to start by just pushing up our activity levels, and we'd start with step count. We'd want to start at about 10,000 steps per day if we're not already achieving that. So this is a nice little place to start, because automatically we're going to increase our NEAT. And by increasing our NEAT, we are going to obviously see a greater energy deficit be created. But how do we go about actually increasing our step count up to 10,000 if we're only hitting 4,000 to 5,000 steps per day? I would almost always start the day with some kind of activity, a walk, and it's something which I do as well. And I believe that it's important that we start our day with some kind of activity, as number one, this gives us a relatively good elevated mood for the day. Number two, it gives us a sense of direction, a sense of drive, a sense of purpose. It will get us up and about and feeling good about the day ahead. Number three, we are doing this at a time of the day where we can do this to some degree subconsciously. We're not overthinking it. And obviously it's relatively low demanding for the mornings as well. And trust me, it's much easier to chip away 4,000 to 5,000 steps in the morning than it's going to be to have to chip away at them at the evening. Because obviously across the course of the day, we are going to indirectly accrue steps, depending on the role that you have. Could be 2,000 to 3,000, could be more. And you got to think, if we've done 4,000 morning, we do 2 to 3 across the day, we have 3,000 to get at the back of the day. But then if we consider we're going to be weight training throughout your course of your weight training session, you pace around during your session, you walk around to get some water, you constantly filling up your water bottle, so on and so forth. You park the car a little bit further away. It should be quite easy to get at least another 2,000 steps, which puts us at 9,000 steps for the day. So this task isn't incredibly difficult, but what I always encourage individuals to do with their step count is to habit stack. So habit stack would be this isn't directly habit stacking. Habit stacking is stacking one habit that you're already doing every day with another that you're trying to adopt. But in this circumstance, I would always have some kind of activity which you can partake in while you are doing your steps. This could be something as simple as listening to a podcast. This could be something as simple as replying to work emails, work text messages, etc., or just doing some general duties which can be done on your phone. I think this is a great way to go about it. Audiobooks, etc., might be helpful too. But then at least this time feels like it's more constructively spent because, like I said, the context of the individual we're dealing with here, someone who's busy, has got obligations, got a family, etc. If you've got a family, it might be a perfect opportunity to spend some time with the little ones as well, take them on a walk and have some quality time, which again makes it seem like time better spent, which I think is awesome. So first and foremost, we would hit our 10,000 step count target. Then we'd probably look at some kind of cardiovascular training. So 115 kilograms, we're out of shape, we're unhealthy. The aerobic capacity is a requirement. So we want to have good cardiovascular health because this is going to optimize outcomes. This is going to optimize recovery. And of course, this is going to also create a greater energy deficit. I would suggest here typically starting at 2 times 30 minutes per week. Do something which is relatively manageable. Obviously, your fitness is going to build up over time and you could potentially partake in something which is a little bit more demanding over time. But here we could just start with some kind of inclined treadmill, a really brisk walk, anything which is going to get the heart rate up to about 120 to 130 beats per minute. At this body weight, at this level of fitness, it should be relatively achievable. So we tick the boxes with the output and the 2 30-minute walks per week, intent walks, I should say. And that's already a good step in the right direction. Nutrition. If we're talking nutrition, what I would start with is just the elimination of any food which is off plan, any food which is eaten out, any food which is calorically dense. If we can make this initial shift and we can just tidy things up, move into 4 high protein meals, vegetables with those meals, carbohydrates at a relatively sparing kind of quantity, we should be able to see ample improvements just by making these small changes, which could see a few kilograms come off, because we need to acknowledge at the start of these journeys, when we're starting from zero, small changes will make a significant difference. So this would be in the first potentially 3 to 4, maybe 6 weeks at the most. And by doing these 3 things, so just a general cleanup of diet, so getting protein in every meal, getting fruit and veg in every meal, limiting carbohydrates to some degree, but we still want to keep some carbohydrates in, hitting 10,000 steps per day, hitting a couple of cardiovascular training sessions per week, we should be able to see everything shift in the right direction. But here's the good part about this. Once we start seeing things shift in the right direction, we're going to feel pretty good about it. So what I mean by we're going to feel pretty good about it is we're going to have a sense of motivation because, okay, we've seen 3-4 kilograms come down. We're not really doing a hell of a lot. We're just doing what we probably should be doing. But it's okay if you're not doing these things because sometimes life takes over. So that's where we would start with that. And with weight training, I'd probably just start with 3 times 30 to 40 minute sessions per week. We want to just do the bare basics. You could probably find some kind of easy to use program. If you're interested, you could jump into our Instagram bio and there's a few free resources, including a free male training program with video tutorials, a free female training program with video tutorials, both very easy to use. So if you're interested in that, jump on the link in our bio on Instagram. And you could make a start here, relatively low volume, relatively straightforward exercises. Just get in 3 times per week because 3 times is better than no times. And we generally don't require as much training volume or as much training stimulus as we would necessarily believe to see outcomes. But we also need to consider as well, weight training is an important component of weight loss because the more lean tissue that we have, the greater the ability to actually shift body fat because we're going to see an elevation in metabolic rate, so on and so forth. Also, it's a great way to establish a degree of momentum because weight training can be enjoyable, it can be progressive, it can be rewarding. So this is incredibly important, but it's also important to consider in these circumstances, right? In the context of a deficit phase, if we're relatively untrained, provided protein intake sits high, we will see a recompositional effect. So we will see a reaccretion of tissue, a reduction in overall body fat, and ultimately we will see some really good outcomes at this point or this part of the journey. So I think this is incredibly important to understand. From a general supplementation perspective, I wouldn't be looking at utilizing too much. I'd just be looking at utilizing a magnesium glycinate or a magnesium citrate for general recovery and just systemic support. I'm looking at potentially a creatine monohydrate to support training performance and recovery. And furthermore to that, maybe some omega-3s, maybe a vitamin D, depending on time of the year, where you are in the world, so on and so forth. And that would be pretty much it. You could potentially look at a multivitamin if your nutrition density wasn't quite there via fruit and veg. Maybe you just don't enjoy fruit and veg. Maybe they put a little bit of a burden on the budget and you can't have the volume that you would necessarily like. Then we would consider a multivitamin. Okay, but we're past our 3 to 4 week mark now and we're starting to see results slow down just from our tidy up. So what would we do? At this point, I would probably use some kind of calorie calculator to work out the exact intake that we should be using to see a 400 to 500 to 1,000 gram loss per week. Then from there, I want to make sure that we can sit below these calorie requirements as well as hit adequate protein. So for a 115 kilogram male, we'd be looking at around 200 grams of protein per day, which can easily be tracked through something such as Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. Again, shameless plug. If you are interested in knowing how to use MyFitnessPal, you can jump on the link in our bio. As a matter of fact, you can actually jump on there and we can give you your calories and macronutrients for free. So from here, the MyFitnessPal guide would tell you how to track all your calories, and then you'd want to make sure you're tracking your protein and your calories. And we would start at what we would perceive as a deficit. And then from here, we would split this into 3 to 4 even meals: protein, carbohydrates, fats. We want to make sure that we're in those parameters within those thresholds, and we would consistently apply. From here, we should capably be able to continue to see the progression of results. Let's say we're looking at 500 grams per week for the next few weeks. Every time we would run into some kind of stall, we would look at a potentially a 250 calorie drop in the overall food while retaining protein, or even potentially considering the escalation of protein. It's important that we do keep in adequate fat intake, because this is a requirement for the ability to get in fat soluble vitamins, the ability to adequately synthesize hormones, so on and so forth. So this is incredibly important as well. But if we were to see a stall for more than 5 to 7 days, we could potentially look at a 200 to 250 calorie drop of the overall calories to make sure that results continue to persist. As we move forward more and more, we may see the necessity for off-plan meals and refeeds. I always would encourage some kind of off-plan meal to stay in the programming all the way through, especially if you're making such a big lifestyle shift. Otherwise, it will become tiring, it will become demanding, it will become relatively difficult to see overall adherence for an extended period of time. But the most important thing is, how do we go about these off-plan meals? We could look at structured refeeds, but I don't want to add that layer of complexity to this video because I want to keep it relatively simple. So it's not unusual to see individuals go have an off-plan meal, they get a large pizza, they get a fat burger and chips, so on and so forth. But the caloric nature of these has every possibility that we could see this offset a majority of the week. So what we'd want to do, we want to offer something of a, not necessarily a lower caloric nature, but something higher protein, higher carbohydrates, lower fats. The reason we look at higher carbohydrates is because then we can see an upregulation in training performance, or the maintenance of training performance. We can see the upregulation of metabolism, or the regulation of the metabolism. We can see an improvement in overall well-being as well. So some options I typically recommend to my clients: steakhouses. I would recommend something like sushi. I would recommend some kind of Asian dishes which are relatively low in things like oils and whatnot. But we obviously want to be responsible with our off-plan meals. What I'd almost always encourage is to do something homemade and something which you can make, which is enjoyable. And just to make sure that we try to edge on the caution of such. Believe it or not, a pasta dish would not even be a bad call, provided we can serve that with some kind of protein. Although I probably wouldn't be leaning towards cream-based dishes. But the off-plan meal is important for psychological relief as well as physiological relief to a degree. But this is going to become more important as the process goes on, because we are going to see a depletion in metabolic hormones further down the line. So you can see from here, we are moving towards our goal closer and closer, faster and faster, which is more than probably achieving more than we want to with consistency. But obviously we want to make sure that our consistency is in check. And we need to acknowledge that around the 12-week mark, we probably are going to start to see some of our old habits creep back in. This is where it becomes incredibly important that we continue to report back to our why, because it will re-incentivize us. It will give us that sense of purpose, that sense of direction, and remind us, obviously, why we're doing this, which should help in keeping us on track, which is incredibly important. So from there, what we could look at furthermore doing is increasing step count to 12,000 to 14,000 results stall. This would be as opposed to dropping calories down. So let's just say we had a week where we're on 2,500 calories. We didn't want to go down to 2,250. We could look at just moving the step count up from 10,000 to 12,000 and look at another way of accreting them across the course of the day. We could look at instead adding another 30-minute session of cardiovascular training per week. These aren't like for like incorporations, but nonetheless, they will provide benefit. So obviously it is going to be a process of progressive overload, but it's important that we do recognize if we see substantial stalls, or if we see situations where we start to become a little bit demoralized and things do start to become slow, there's no problems with reverting back to maintenance. So pulling in calories, 500 calories above where they were, sitting there for a week, seeing how you feel, having a break from the cardiovascular training, then tucking back in the next week. We need to consider with such journeys, they are long haul journeys. They do require long-term adherence, and they do require us to have a degree of mental fortitude. I generally, like I mentioned, will start with the step count and the weight training concepts, because this is something which I did when I fell out of love with training a few years ago. It was a little over 5 years ago now. Got back into the weight training, got back into the step count, got back into the cardiovascular training. Once I ticked these boxes and found the passion for it again, I was able to dial in on the food. Obviously, once the food was dialed in, that was when I really saw a substantial improvement. But going with this more indirect manner rather than going all guns blazing out the gates, we should be able to get ourselves in a position. And if we do start to see stalls, we are at that 12th week and we do need a little bit more control around it, that would potentially be when we would look at the employing the services of a coach to make sure that we can become educated and we can adapt or attain long-term plans, long-term habits, long-term protocols, which we can continue to utilize across the course of our journey and our lifetimes. Weight loss can be a daunting process, but we need to consider as well that if you are making a substantial lifestyle shift, it will be a challenge, it will be new, and that's okay. All we're looking at is chipping away, seeing improvements week on week and ticking boxes, ticking boxes, ticking boxes. The second, if we saw any biofeedback deterioration, such as things like sleep starts to decline, mood starts to decline, etc., it may be an indicator that we do need to, as I previously mentioned, revert back to maintenance, cruise along there for a little bit, and then return back to the deficit when the time is right. But it's also important important that we live our lives amidst the journey. We don't want to completely rid ourselves of our ability to have these outlets, and that we remember that life is more important than any fitness journey. A fitness journey can resume a week later. If we have family obligations, we have family events, we have a friend's wedding, for example, I would give one every right to go and enjoy that. And I think it should be enjoyed because these are often once in a lifetime events. And sometimes the people around us who love us do require us to be there for them, which may make it difficult to remain on track. But I will also add to that, depending on the complexity of the circumstances, if you want to get it done, you should be able to work around a majority of these events with little to no repercussions to be paid. Now, I've kept this video relatively simple. So what I would encourage you to do if you are looking to embark on your journey, jump onto our Instagram page, fill out our calorie calculator, and we'll send across the specific numbers as well as some strategies for you. This will also give you your MyFitnessPal ebook so you can learn to track your calories, and then just jump on the bio and also download the relevant training program just to make an easy start. Once you've made this start and once you've made these relatively simple changes at the beginning, if you feel like you do require some kind of support, some kind of help, feel free to reach out for coaching, whether it be with us or even if you were to consider someone else. It's always important to have that guidance. I think that accountability goes a long way. But what I did say at the beginning, it's important that you remain accountable to yourself. So recognize your why, recognize your goals, and make sure that you can do your best to stay on track to make the change for you. Well, any questions, don't hesitate and let me know. Like, subscribe, check a comment below with any questions, and have a great day.